All right, there we go. Well, welcome everybody. There are some folks rolling in, so I'm going to just take a few minutes on this slide to explain what's going on. If any of you have seen me in presentations in the past, with some of my peers, one of the things I really like to present on is scenarios. Eligibility scenarios were my favorite thing as I was learning as a new recruiter. And so I like to give as many opportunities to do that as well. Today, I'm going to try something new, for me at least. And I'm going to integrate a poll, kind of like a trivia that you'd see at a restaurant, where you have those little boxes and you pick the answers. The trivia game there'll be some questions based on each scenario. You'll be able to see it on your phone, on your web browser, on another computer, and you'll be able to respond directly to those through the browser, through your phone. You can scan the QR code or type in the short link there, pollev.com/MD2018. And that it's also going to be put in the chat periodically. When you log in there, you can skip the registration. You can just put in your name, and we will have a variety of questions throughout the course of the presentation. At the end, somebody will have the most points. So you get points by answering correctly and by quickly. So the faster you answer, as long as you're correct, you'll get more points. I think there's 1,000 points maximum per question. And after each question, we'll kind of see a leaderboard, and it's a little bit fun. If you don't have Poll Anywhere, if it's not working for you, don't worry. Normally we don't have that little bonus content in there, but you'll still be able to see all the questions and answers. Your responses won't be logged, but that you can still participate fully in the presentation. So hopefully everything will work smoothly, and we're going to get going. I will let you know that everything that you see today is based on how I would do things in my state. So there'll be some areas where there's some known differences between other states as far as like soon after the move, and there'll be an indication. I'll point that out when we get there. But anytime you look at a presentation around scenarios or on eligibility, you always have to look at your state as the primary resource. We look at the statute, the Code of Federal Regulations, the non-regulatory guidance. Those are all the documents we use to get our definitions. Michigan tends to stick very closely to the non-regulatory guidance. And so we're maybe more conservative than some states. So if you feel that some of the information or some of the responses weren't correct based on what you would do in your state, you might indeed be right for your state. Each state has some leeway in interpreting the guidance and the statute that you see on the screen. I'm going to go really quick through just a few basic definitions. Since we're talking about eligibility, we're trying to find migratory children, which means that they're no older than 21 years of age or entitled to a free public education. That we need the child to have made a qualifying move in the last 36 months, anytime, as a migratory worker with or fisher, or to join or precede a parent, guardian, or spouse who's a migratory agricultural worker. So we have that migratory agricultural worker, migratory fisher, and the child is moved with them or as that person. In the event, when we're trying to establish somebody as a migratory fisher or migratory worker, we're primarily looking at them having made a move. And then soon after that move, which in Michigan is 60 days. I know some states extend that out to 75 or 90. In Michigan, it's strictly 60. And so for today's presentation, remember that definition. And they engage in qualifying work soon after that move, so within 60 days. Sometimes the worker, which is very rare in Michigan, it may be more common in other places, they will come to Michigan and not find work or not engage. And that's okay. They can still be established as a migratory worker based on the first option anytime in the last 36 months, or if they came here seeking work and they have a history of moves in the past 36 months that result in work, at least 2, then we would consider that individual a migratory agricultural worker or a migratory fisher. So The factors of eligibility are on the screen right here. That's a format that my friend Emily from New York kind of made up, and I really like the format. Age, they have to be under the age of 22. School completion. For us, someone that hasn't got a high school diploma or GED would likely be eligible for free public education. We need to establish that migratory agricultural worker or fisher based on a qualifying move and engagement soon after the move and qualifying work. And then we look at the children's qualifying move to determine if it was with, to join or proceed, a migratory agricultural worker or fisher, or on their own as the migratory worker themselves. So with that, we are going to jump into our first scenario. I'm going to give you a few minutes to read that. If you have questions, I can try to answer some of those on the chat. I don't know if people can unmute and speak, but if you can, you're welcome to do so. We'll give you a few minutes to go through the scenario, and then we'll start those questions up. I'd ask Jessica if you could re-share the QR code and link to the poll.
Will do.
Come up. Thanks.
Okay, they're both on there.
Thank you. We'll give you a couple more minutes here. At 1:40, we'll move on to the questions. We're trying to decide if there are any eligible children, and if so, what is their QAD? Those are the questions that are going to be asked in the trivia poll here in just a moment. About 30 seconds left, and we're gonna move on to questions.
Good question. So on the poll, are they supposed to be seeing like how to answer that? I don't know if everybody's seeing that.
Yeah, so the questions are going to appear on the screen here during the presentation, but it should also appear on their device, on their phone or, browser, whichever device they're using to participate.
Okay.
If you don't see it saying the competition has already started, or there's still time to catch up, if it's just saying waiting for the presentation to begin, you might want to refresh your screen here in a moment.
Okay. So mine just says it started, but I can't see any of the questions.
Yep.
Yet. Just want to make
But it'll kind of appear in unison with the screen. So
Okay, perfect.
it'll become obvious up to the first one.
Okay.
So here we go. Again, up to 1,000 points per answer. The first question is going to display on the screen. It's going to give you a few seconds to read the question. When I move on to the next slide after that, you'll see the responses possible. Pick one. You can change your answer if you decide to. You only get points if you're correct, and you get more points the faster you pick the correct answer. So the first question is Angela a migratory worker? So once I click this next slide, you should see the responses both on your device and on the screen.
I don't know if it's the same for everybody else, but mine just says the competition has already started and there's time to catch up, but it doesn't let me pick anything.
Well, this is a little bit what I was afraid of, but I can manually activate it, I believe. Oops. Let's see.
Yeah, mine's still saying the same thing.
Well, this is not. It's working.
There was a question if it would work if we register. I don't know.
No, it's not that.
Okay,
Give me 1 second.
okay.
Try to fix that.
Maybe this first one, in the meantime, we could put in the chat
Yeah,
box.
we can do that in the chat box here in a second, but
Okay.
I prefer to have it work here.
Okay.
I apologize about that.
This is your brain break, everybody. In the meantime, while we're waiting for that, does anybody have another technology? Not to say that Bruce has to switch to that, but does anybody have another tool that they like to use for these kind of things if they do any sort of gamify things? Some people like Kahoot. Who else? What other kind of things do you love?
Give me a second here. We'll catch up on the speed.
Look it. Looks like
I
so.
literally tested it right before we joined too.
That's what I always have.
I'm just gonna close it down and restart it and see if we can get it to go.
Okay.
Hmm.
Maybe while we're waiting, who has been a recruiter less than a month? Is anyone brand new? Victor says me. Claudia. 1 month. So welcome to the,
Here we go. We got her going.
okay.
Let me start the slideshow. Apologize again about that.
Ah, I see it.
We're
Okay,
in the home stretch now.
good job.
All right. That was fun. Is Angela a migratory worker? Here we go. Your answer should be on your screen. Should quickly just be able to pick an answer. I see responses coming in there. We got 30 people that have responded. 20 seconds left to answer. Okay, the poll is closed. We're gonna go 50 respondents. We'll take a look at what we all said. So the correct answer, which we had about a 50-50 tie for the first two, is she a worker? Yes, we think that she's a worker based on this year's move and prior history. So the first answer is incorrect because only if Angela obtains work in 60 days. Certainly if she did in the first 60 days, she'd become a migratory agricultural worker. In this case, though, we don't even need to wait for that because she was seeking work this year and has a history of at least 2 moves. She was not established in the past based on our criteria because it was over 60 days. So I understand why some people would say that. And the work is qualifying work. So Antonio, Isara, Catherine, Leticia, and Martha and Zan are on the leaderboard. Move on to our next question. What is the QAD for the children? We'll just get you a month and a year.
I just put the scenario too in the chat in case anyone forgot the scenario.
Thanks. About 15 more seconds to respond. Two, one. All right. Correct answer, which overwhelmingly was chosen, was March of 2024. Sarah takes the lead. We got 3 people up there in the top of the leaderboard with perfect scores, but plenty of time for you guys to still get up there in the top 10. Does this scenario require any comments on the CLE? Here we go. Yeah. All right, so poll is closed. And so we get to the answers. Yes, we can, it does require comments. Then we need the prior moves comments to say where they moved to and from and what kind of work did they do. And we need a statement also to say that we know that they were seeking the work, actively seeking the work soon after arriving in Michigan. So, all right. Some new folks up on the leaderboard. Good job, everybody. Just to kind of go over the scenario in case anybody has any questions and if some of those are in the chat, please let me know. The children are elementary age, which means that they're likely not have a high school diploma or GED. That's kind of assumed in the question. She was seeking work, Angela was. She had 2 moves in the last 36 months that ended up resulting in qualifying work. Therefore, she is considered a migratory agricultural worker on the current move. And then her children moved with her, so they would be eligible for the MEP. They would be eligible for a QAD of March 2nd, 2024 when they move with mom. And of course, it's also important to note the residency date. So the residency date would also be March 2nd, which is just the date that they began living in the current place that they live now. So any questions on that scenario before we move on to the second one? I'm gonna.
There was one comment about, I was told that moves from Mexico don't count.
Yeah, so you can move from Venus, Mars, the sun, anywhere you want, but the move has to come to the United States or any of its territories. One of the things I recommend for all recruiters is reading the non-regulatory guidance, and that is explicitly stated in there. I believe, if I remember the verbiage correctly, they even mentioned Mexico as one of the places. So you can definitely come from anywhere as long as you move to the United States or its territories. Another question I'm seeing, if 2 prior moves resulted in work after 60 days, are they still considered qualifying moves? A qualifying move has nothing to do with work at all. every one of us on this presentation probably has made a qualifying move sometime in our lives, which means that we as an adult or even us as a child have moved with our parents or on our own to another place because it was cheaper to live, because we were trying to get closer to work, or we were looking for a job in an area. That is a qualifying move. One residency to another across school district boundaries due to economic necessity. Good question. Well, there's not gonna be anything on the poll right now. It will pop up after we go through the second scenario, which we're gonna open up right now, kind of get caught up on time a little bit. We'll give you just a couple minutes to read this one. Again, we're looking to see if the children are eligible for the MEP. And if so, what is their QAD? For those of you that are having trouble registering, you can skip the registration on Poll Anywhere and simply just type in your name. It'll on the next screen. We'll give about 2 or 3 minutes here. Jessica's also posted the scenario in the chat, so if we move on to the questions, you'll still have access to that. Okay, just another minute here. A question from Yadira, but I can't answer that question right now, but we'll come back to it, I promise. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and move on to the poll questions. Hopefully everyone had enough time. Again, you can scroll up in the chat and see the scenario that's been posted. So we want to know, while in Traverse City, can the recruiter up there find Ms. Hernandez's daughter eligible? Here we go. It's coming in, about 20 seconds left. And the poll is closed. Let's take a look and see. We have some people that said no, because the worker didn't move to Traverse City. That's kind of a common misconception, that a child is only eligible if the worker is present at the time. You can go back and find historical moves for the children, and where they've made a move with the worker in the last, with the migratory agricultural worker Fisher in the last 36 months, a qualifying move with to join or precede them, or on their own in the last 36 months. It doesn't say in the definitions on the current move or in the current location. So second answer was the correct one. And definitely some movement there on the leaderboard. We go on to the next question. What is the best QAD for the child? So someone is saying they didn't do agricultural work, they did fishing work. Okay, poll is closed. And the correct, whoa. The correct answer should be January 11th. That poll has the wrong answer. The poll's got the answer wrong. The correct answer would have been actually January 11th. So those of you that get May 1st would have been wrong. When we look at the scenario, the last time that they moved with the worker was to Coopersville on January 11th. Jeez. Yeah, I got you 300 points next time I see you. All right. If the father were to join the family in Traverse City in June of 2024, what would you do as a recruiter if you were the Traverse City recruiter? I could go back and try to fix the poll, but I'm worried I'd break it. Okay, the poll is closed. So if the father did come to Traverse City, he's still considered a migratory agricultural or migratory fisher. And he would be moving to join the child. If the child moved to precede the worker, they would have moved within a 12-month period of each other. In a short period of time, no longer than 12 months, I believe is how it's stated in the regulations. And so, in the non-regulatory guidance, so therefore, the child would then become eligible for a new QAD, which means you would want to document that on the COE.
There were like two questions. I don't know if you want to address.
I'm gonna address some of those here once I get off of the next slide. There's our current count, through a bone to some of you on that second answer, so I apologize about that. Why would the QAD be in June if they did the move in May? So the QAD, when the worker and the child move on different dates, the date that the move was completed by both the worker and the child is what becomes the QAD. So in a case where the child precedes the worker, or they come first, that child's QAD will be the date that the worker arrived and joined the child. Can you use the previous work? Yeah, so that in the scenario, mother didn't have previous work, but father did. So when the father comes in, even if he didn't find work in Traverse City, he's still considered a migratory agricultural worker. So to go over why they're eligible, she's 10 years old, so she meets the age criteria. Again, with school completion, given the young age, we assume they don't have a high school diploma or GD. The father made a qualifying move to Homer, Alaska, and engaged in qualifying work. It was we called it temporary fishing work. We wrote it to kind of imply that the work could go year round. So he was considered a migratory agricultural worker as of September 16th. Since he was considered a migratory agricultural worker, anytime that the children move with to join or precede that worker, the worker will or the child will become eligible for the MEP or eligible for a new QAD. So the last time the child made a qualifying move was to Coopersville. January 11th, which gives them that QAD. The residency date would be May 1st when they actually started living in Traverse City. So, any other questions on that? Oh, there's one more. The worker plan on working more than 12 months. That's I think is what you're asking there. So the worker's statement about how long he planned to work is really important when the worker is still engaged in that qualifying activity. However, we know that the worker didn't stay there for 12 months. They actually left within a few months in January when they went to Coopersville. So when you have a worker that's engaged in the qualifying work currently or working with employer, you want to use that temporary statement. If they've already left, it doesn't matter what their intentions were originally. What matters is how long they actually stayed. So that's how we would look at it in Michigan. The worker would have stated that they worked until January 11th, and then they moved to Coopersville. That would be the statement. And I see, Mary Lou, that you're putting in some comments about California, and they have some different rules. That's something that you could discuss. You could bring this scenario to your supervisors and talk about it. Like I said, different states have different perspectives. We feel like we are following pretty close to the letter of the law when it comes to the non-regulatory guidance. Any other questions? No? All right, we're going to move on to the next scenario. One of the things I suggest we'll give you a little more time is to create a little timeline for William, because some of those questions are going to rely on that timeline. Again, Jessica will probably put the question in the chat. We'll give you a few minutes to really look at this one in depth. Give you a couple more minutes. I see some questions in the chat. We're going to get to those in a second. Okay, we're going to move on to the questions. Everyone had enough time to kind of make a timeline and take a look at that? Where he's been, what he's done? All right. First question is going to be, how many qualifying moves did William make in this scenario? And here we go. You guys are definitely getting faster about putting those answers in. Okay, poll is closed. And we will take a look at, the correct answer is 3 qualifying moves. So every time William moves from one residency to another across school district boundaries due to economic necessity, he has made a qualifying move. Qualifying move does not necessarily mean that he's eligible for the MEP and any one of those particular moves. All right. Claudia, you definitely could have used those 3,000 points I see in there, and I'm not going to hear the end of that, am I? All right, next question. How many times did William engage in qualifying work in the last 36 months? How many times did they engage in qualifying work in the preceding 36 months? Mhm. All right, the poll is up. Seeing a lot of 3s in the chat. Let's see what the answer is. How many times did he, ooh, got everybody. How many times did he engage in qualifying work in the last 36 months? So this leaderboard isn't going to change. Let's take a look at the explanation. I think we're going to have a little bit of discussion in this one. In January of 2021, he moved from Guatemala to Holland. In August 17th of 2021, he moves from Holland to Ithaca. They engage in qualifying work on both of those, on those moves. However, those are prior to today's date 3 years ago. So therefore, they're not in the last 36 months. Yes, Ashley is correct. It's kind of a trick question, but not really. We have to always, at the time of the interview, we always have to kind of imagine that we're using a crystal ball, and that crystal ball can allow us to see the history of a worker, a history of a child, but only back 36 months from today. So the next question would be, when he engages in qualifying, when he moves to Ithaca to Holland in January 2022. Now we're within the last 36 months. When he does that, he engages in something that would typically, be qualifying work. And that is milking cows, which he does soon after the move. However, for work to be qualifying, it has to be in agriculture or fishing, which milking cows is definitely agricultural. There's no debate there, hopefully. However, it has to also be seasonal or temporary. And the worker, in this case, has been working there longer than 12 months. So when you talk to him and you're having that discussion as a recruiter, you might be asking him how long does he plan on staying there? He says a couple months. However, when you find out when he started working, you realize that it's already exceeded 12 months. So whatever intention he had or has now is irrelevant. So similarly to when we looked in the prior, when we looked into the prior scenario, when we look back to see when the child moved with a worker, we can look back historically and we said, we looked at their intentions versus reality. They intended to stay longer, but actually only stay a few months. It matters what actually happens in reality more than their statement. There's also some information in the guidance about that, what happens when people give you a statement and you do a COE. So if we had met him a couple months into this job and he had given us the statement saying he was going to be there a couple months, that would have been qualifying work. And if he ended up staying longer, we don't tear up their COE or pull their kids out of school. We just no longer consider that person a worker. Laura's question about getting his previous job back. Anytime you start a new period of employment, even if it's with the same employer, you have to still evaluate that employment to see if it's qualifying work. So it has to, every time you look at it, it has to be seasonal or temporary in agriculture or fishing. One of the tricky things about the MEP, in my opinion at least, is that when we find a child eligible, we give them that eligibility, we write that COE, and typically we respect that eligibility for 36 months from the QAD, regardless of what happens next, as long as in our state. I know that there's some exceptions to that in some places, but for the most part, most people honor the COE that was written in their state for the entire 36 months, regardless if they make subsequent moves or they stop working or the worker leaves, any of those kind of situations. We don't remove eligibility unless they graduate or they become over the age of 21. They get their 22nd birthday. With the migratory agricultural worker, it's a little different because every time we do a COE, we have to reestablish that worker. So just because they were on a COE from last year or the years past or a COE in another state, and they were found to be a migratory agricultural worker or migratory fisher, we still have to look at that situation again and see if we agree now in the current time frame whether that's true. The rationale that was given for that is because of the wording of the COE and that it's written in the present tense. So they have to be not only determined to be a migratory worker, but they still must be having that status at the time that you write the COE. And that's in one of the Q&As from OME. Any other questions? Getting the job back just means we evaluate it as if it was the first time he was there. All right, some good questions. So he is 21, he's a dropout. He has made no qualifying moves in the 36 months that resulted in qualifying work. Even though he did make a qualifying move that wasn't qualifying work, he's not a migratory agricultural worker. And therefore he didn't move with, to join, proceed, or as a migratory worker. There was no worker in this scenario. So there can't be any eligibility without a migratory worker. Great. All right, our last scenario for the day. This is your last chance to score some points. Go ahead and read the scenario. Work in Holland, I'm sorry, Claudia, the work in Holland was prior to the last 36 months, it was longer than 36 months. Oh, thank you about the abbreviation. Our data systems might be a little different. We have the abbreviation says GUT to make it easier for people to distinguish that between other cities. It gets transmitted to M6 using the same code as everybody else, though. Okay, we'll give it about 1 more minute. Make sure we have enough time to get through the questions and the leaderboard and leave a few minutes at the end if anybody else wants to comment or ask questions. All right, we're gonna move on to the questions. Is there a migratory worker in this scenario? All right, time is up. Let's see the results. The correct answer is Jaime only. Magnolia can't be considered a migratory agricultural worker because she has never made a qualifying move within the to the United States and engaged in qualifying work in the United States. Only Jaime is the only one that is described as doing that in this scenario. The correct answer was the first answer. It's pretty close here at the top. We're coming down to our last few questions, but there's still a lot of points available left. Is Magnolia's newborn child currently eligible for the map? This is going to be a little controversial. Five seconds left. Okay, let's see. The correct answer is no, she did not move with to join or proceed a migratory agricultural worker or migratory fisher. The answer about being under 3-year-olds, or if anyone had put that in there, to be eligible for the MEP, as far as age is concerned, you can be any age under the age of 22. When we're talking about a newborn baby, we just want to make sure that they were born before the qualifying move with to join or proceed the migratory agricultural worker. All right. So Oswaldo is gonna hold on to that lead, but Marie and Lindsay are close at his heels. If Magnolia and her children join Jaime in Bangor next month, will the child then be eligible? We got a couple what ifs here. Few seconds left. Get your answers in. I think everybody's responded. And yes, they would become eligible because at that point, they have joined the worker on his move. Waldo's still holding on. Marie and Lindsay are at their heels. So the child was a newborn baby. They're under the age of 22. They were born before the qualifying move, which is important with newborns for us to distinguish. Obviously, the newborn hasn't got a GED or high school diploma. So when we say they're eligible for our free public education, that's kind of the criteria we look at. A newborn probably wouldn't go to school, but they're not barred from school in the future. The worker, Jamie, made a qualifying move from Bangor to Grand Rapids and engaged in qualifying work. However, the child never made a move with to join or proceed the worker in the scenario as it was written. That's related to the child's move. So they kind of moved, then he left and made some subsequent moves and established himself as a migratory worker. So everything kind of depends on them reuniting at some point for eligibility to be possible. I want to take a couple quick questions if there are any for this scenario. Maria, I hope you enjoy Bangor. If there are no questions, I want to give everybody one more shot at the leaderboard. So we have a bonus question. Bonus question is, Maria 17 was found eligible elsewhere in your state last year and a COE was completed. She returns to your state this year on a qualifying move to your district without the migratory worker. So there's no migratory worker, but she moved to your state, to your district, right after, or without the worker. So here we go. Here comes your options. Choose the best answer. All right, let's see what the group says. So I agree with that first answer. The majority of you put that as well. Maria had a CWE done in her state. I kind of alluded to that a little earlier in today's presentation. That once a CWE is written in your state, that child's eligibility should remain for 36 months when they're anywhere in your state. I do know that there's some states that have variations on how they deal with that. But in a general rule, I believe that to be the correct way to proceed. And it's a good opportunity to share those kind of thoughts with your state if they do something different for them to consider it, not saying that it's right or wrong. Saying that Maria is not eligible for new CWE in your district, so she cannot be served is kind of the opposite of number one. I've had instances where I've heard of that. That's just not how we do things in Michigan. We find them eligible as a state. Maria's qualifying move this year results in a new QAD. It doesn't, because she didn't move with, to join, or proceed, or as the worker. So you would not complete a new CWE necessarily for Maria in your district. She's, at least certainly the first part is true, that she's not eligible for new QAD. Some places may redocument the original CWE, but in our case, she's not eligible for new QAD. So let's see the final results. Well, look at that. Lindsay from Iowa edges out as well, though, in the 11th hour. Congratulations to Lindsay from Iowa. I am impressed that you did so well despite having Alex Johnson as your IDNR coordinator. You can tell him I said that. Claudia from Washington, great job. Christina as well, and to everybody. I really appreciate your participation. There was a question about the first scenario. What would the comments be? So as a reminder for the first scenario, let's see if I can get that on the screen. I try to drag this over here real quick. So the first scenario, the children were elementary age, they were in elementary school, so they're eligible. She was seeking work soon after the move, and she has 2 prior moves in the last 36 months that resulted in qualifying work at some point after that move. It doesn't have to be soon after the move. So your comments would state that Angela, well, let's actually bring the scenario up on the screen. Angela moved from Mexico to Imlay City, seeking work at the local picker factory. So the recruiter can document that she applied. And then you would document that, and I'll just make it the months. So in February of 2022, she moved from Mexico to Imlay City, and made a qualifying move from Mexico to Imlay City, and engaged in washing cucumbers, qualifying work washing cucumbers. And then in March of 2023, she moved from Mexico to Imlay City and engaged in qualifying work, washing cucumbers. So the comments are quite lengthy when you're doing seeking qualifying work, because you should be documenting both that they were seeking qualifying work as well as the 2 moves, why they were qualifying moves and what kind of qualifying work they were doing in the dates, so that you can see that it was in the last 36 months they had 2 of those, and then the work was indeed qualifying. Let's see, do we have any other comments here?
There was one question about whether states had different rules, and I just put in the guidance that everyone has the same guidance and regulations, but sometimes they may interpret them differently, but we all do have the same rules.
Yeah, I mean, so the way that I coach that is that each individual state has the right to interpret the statute and the Code of Federal Regulations for themselves. If you stick to the interpretations that are provided to you in the non-regulatory guidance from OME, you're generally safe. So many years ago, there was a big audit of all the MUT programs, and they looked at eligibility, adherence to the rules, and if your child children were found ineligible to that, you may have had to pay money back as a state. So it became really important. I mean, it's always been important, but it's especially important to make sure that your position as a state is defendable. And if it's documented in the non-regulatory guidance, OME should have your back if it was ever questioned. Yeah, 4B is really 4B is really not very common in Michigan because we're a receiving state, so people come here to work and they generally find it this year, or if they haven't, they found it in the prior years, so we can use one of those. I appreciate it. I apologize to everybody about the first scenario, the presentation. I got logged out of the poll software. Had to relog in and everything was back to normal. And my sincere apologies to Claudia and her 3,000 points and anybody else that had marked off January 11th. We'll get it right next.
Thanks, Bruce, for a great job.
All right.